Can you inherit sin along with wealth? Can the crimes of your grandfather become your burden? This is the story of a young man who discovered that some inheritances come with a price no one wants to pay.
Aditya was 25 years old when he received the news that would change his life. His grandfather, Rajesh Malhotra, whom he had never met, had passed away and left his entire estate to him. Aditya's father had been estranged from Rajesh for decades. They had stopped speaking long before Aditya was born, though his father never explained why. Whenever young Aditya asked about his grandfather, his father's face would darken. Some men, his father would say, build their success on the backs of others. Your grandfather was such a man. I want nothing to do with his wealth or his legacy. But now his father was also gone, having passed away 2 years earlier from illness, and the inheritance had passed to Aditya, the only living heir. The lawyer who contacted him painted a picture of substantial wealth, a large mansion, extensive property, investments, and cash assets worth millions. Your grandfather was a very successful businessman, the lawyer explained. He built an empire in real estate and trading. You're a very fortunate young man. Aditya, who had been struggling to make ends meet working as a junior architect, could hardly believe his luck. He had been living in a small rented apartment, barely able to afford basic necessities. And now, suddenly, he was wealthy beyond his wildest dreams. His girlfriend, Neha, was excited for him. This is incredible. You deserve this good fortune, Aditya. Think of all the things we can do now. But Aditya's mother was less enthusiastic. She had been married to Aditya's father for 30 years and knew the family history better than anyone. Your father refused this inheritance for a reason, she said quietly. He knew something about how that wealth was acquired. He chose poverty over accepting it. But father never told me what that reason was, Aditya replied. And I can't afford to refuse millions based on vague suspicions. I have debts, mother. I have a future to build.
Aditya was 25 years old when he received the news that would change his life. His grandfather, Rajesh Malhotra, whom he had never met, had passed away and left his entire estate to him. Aditya's father had been estranged from Rajesh for decades. They had stopped speaking long before Aditya was born, though his father never explained why. Whenever young Aditya asked about his grandfather, his father's face would darken. Some men, his father would say, build their success on the backs of others. Your grandfather was such a man. I want nothing to do with his wealth or his legacy. But now his father was also gone, having passed away 2 years earlier from illness. And the inheritance had passed to Aditya, the only living heir. The lawyer who contacted him painted a picture of substantial wealth, a large mansion, extensive property, investments, and cash assets worth millions. Your grandfather was a very successful businessman, the lawyer explained. He built an empire in real estate and trading. You're a very fortunate young man. Aditya, who had been struggling to make ends meet working as a junior architect, could hardly believe his luck. He had been living in a small rented apartment, barely able to afford basic necessities. And now, suddenly, he was wealthy beyond his wildest dreams. His girlfriend, Neha, was excited for him. This is incredible. You deserve this good fortune, Aditya. Think of all the things we can do now. But Aditya's mother was less enthusiastic. She had been married to Aditya's father for 30 years and knew the family history better than anyone. Your father refused this inheritance for a reason, she said quietly. He knew something about how that wealth was acquired. He chose poverty over accepting it. But father never told me what that reason was, Aditya replied. And I can't afford to refuse millions based on vague suspicions. I have debts, mother. I have a future to build. His mother looked at him with sadness in her eyes. Just promise me you'll be careful. Money that comes from dark places carries darkness with it. Aditya kissed her forehead. It's just superstition, mother. Money is money. It doesn't have a conscience. He would soon learn how wrong he was. The Malhotra mansion stood on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by high walls and overgrown gardens. It was a grand colonial-era building that had clearly been magnificent in its prime, but now showed signs of neglect. When Aditya arrived for the first time, he was accompanied by the estate manager, an elderly man named Kumar who had served Rajesh for 40 years. Mr. Malhotra was a hard man, Kumar said as they walked through the dusty halls. Very particular about everything. But he was alone for many years. After your father left, he had no family. He would sit in his study every evening, drinking and looking at old papers. The mansion was filled with expensive furniture covered in dust sheets, paintings on the walls, and artifacts from around the world. It was like a museum frozen in time. "Why did my father leave?" Aditya asked. "What happened between them?" Kumar's expression became guarded. "That is not my place to say, sir. But there are documents in your grandfather's study. Letters, papers. Perhaps they will answer your questions." That evening, after Kumar had left for the day, Aditya explored the study. It was a dark room with heavy wooden furniture and shelves filled with ledgers and files. In a locked drawer, which Aditya had the key for, he found a collection of old letters and documents. As he began reading them, a disturbing picture emerged. His grandfather had been a ruthless businessman. The letters contained evidence of manipulation, fraud, and coercion. There were desperate pleas from people Rajesh had cheated. Please, Mr. Malhotra, I beg you to reconsider. That land has been in my family for generations. The price you're offering is a fraction of its value. My children will have nothing. You promised me a fair partnership, but the contract you had me sign gives you everything and leaves me with debts I cannot repay. You have destroyed my life. My father trusted you, and you betrayed that trust. The shame of what you did drove him to take his own life. I hope you can live with that. There were dozens of such letters, spanning decades. Rajesh had built his fortune through predatory business practices, taking advantage of desperate people, using legal technicalities to cheat others out of their property and money. One letter was from Aditya's own father, written when he was a young man. Father, I cannot accept what you have done to the Sharma family. They trusted you, and you destroyed them. I cannot be part of this. I am leaving, and I will never use a single rupee of your money. Your wealth is built on the suffering of others, and I want no part of it. Aditya sat in the dark study, feeling sick to his stomach. His grandfather had been a monster, and now he, Aditya, was living in the mansion that suffering had built. Over the following weeks, Aditya tried to ignore what he had learned. He told himself that the past was the past. His grandfather's sins were not his responsibility. He began using the wealth to improve his life. He paid off his debts, bought a new car, and started planning his wedding to Neha. Life was good. The money made everything easier. But he couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. The mansion felt oppressive. At night, he would hear strange sounds, creaking floorboards, doors opening by themselves, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. It's just an old house, he told himself. Old houses make noises. But it was more than sounds. He began having vivid nightmares. In his dreams, he would see faces, desperate, angry, accusing faces. They would surround him, reaching out, demanding justice. You live in luxury while we suffer, they would say. You enjoy what was stolen from us. Aditya would wake up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding. Neha noticed the change in him. You seem troubled. Is everything all right? I'm fine, he lied. Just adjusting to this new life. But he wasn't fine. The guilt was growing. Every time he spent money from the inheritance, he wondered whose suffering had paid for it. One day, while going through more of his grandfather's papers, Aditya found a list of names, families that Rajesh had wronged over the years. Next to each name was a brief description of what had been done to them. Sharma family took their ancestral land through fraudulent contract, 1985. Desai family cheated out of business partnership, left them bankrupt, 1992. Patel family manipulated into selling property at fraction of value, 1998. There were 15 families on the list. Aditya decided to investigate. He looked up these families and discovered that many of them were still alive, still suffering from the consequences of what his grandfather had done. The Sharma family, for instance, had never recovered from losing their land. The father had fallen into alcoholism and depression. The children had grown up in poverty. The Desai family had been forced to leave the city in shame after losing their business. They now lived in a small village, barely surviving. Each family had a story of how Rajesh Malhotra had destroyed their lives and built his wealth on their ruin. And now Aditya was living comfortably because of those destroyed lives. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He was benefiting from crimes. He was complicit. Every rupee he spent was blood money. The knowledge became a weight Aditya couldn't escape. He stopped sleeping properly. He couldn't enjoy the wealth anymore. Every luxury reminded him of someone suffering. Nahon noticed his deterioration. Aditya, you've lost weight. You look exhausted. What's wrong? He finally told her everything. About the letters, about the families his grandfather had destroyed, about the guilt that was consuming him. Neha listened, then said practically, Aditya, these things happened decades ago. You weren't even born. You can't be held responsible for your grandfather's actions. But I'm benefiting from them, Aditya replied. I'm living in a house built on their suffering. I'm spending money that should have been theirs. What do you want to do? Neha asked. Give it all away? Become poor to assuage your guilt? Maybe, Aditya said. Maybe that's exactly what I should do. Neha looked at him in disbelief. That's insane. You'd be throwing away your future. Our future. What good would that do anyone? It would do good for the families who were wronged, Aditya said. They're still suffering while I live in luxury. How is that fair? Life isn't fair. Neha said, her voice rising. Bad things happen, but you can't undo the past. And destroying your own life won't help anyone. They argued for hours, but couldn't find agreement. Neha wanted him to accept the inheritance and move on. Aditya couldn't let go of the guilt. That night, alone in the mansion, Aditya made a decision. He would find these families. He would meet them face to face, and he would see what, if anything, could be done to make amends for his grandfather's sins. The next morning, he began his journey. The first family on the list was the Sharmas, who lived in a poor neighborhood across the city. When he knocked on their door, an elderly man answered. He looked at Aditya with confusion. Can I help you? Are you Mr. Sharma? Aditya asked. Did you once own land that my grandfather, Rajesh Malhotra, acquired in 1985? The old man's face changed immediately. Recognition, then anger, then bitterness crossed his features. Malhotra, he spat the name. That devil. He destroyed my father. And now you come here. Why? To gloat. No, Aditya said quickly. I came to apologize. And to see if there's anything I can do to make amends. Mr. Sharma stared at him in disbelief. Amends? You think you can make amends for stealing a man's legacy? For driving him to drink himself to death? For forcing his family into poverty? I know I can't undo the past, Aditya said. But I have to try to do something. Please, let me help. The old man laughed bitterly. Help? With money stolen from us in the first place? That's not help. That's just returning a fraction of what was taken. But after a long silence, he said, Come in. I'll tell you the full story, and then you can decide what making amends looks like. Over the next few months, Aditya visited each family on the list. Each story was heartbreaking in its own way. The Desai family had lost not just their business, but their reputation. Mr. Desai's son had been unable to attend university because of the financial ruin. He now worked as a laborer, though he had dreamed of becoming an engineer. The Patel family had lost their ancestral home. Mrs. Patel's mother had died of stress-related illness within a year of the loss. She couldn't bear to see her children homeless. Mrs. Patel told Aditya with tears in her eyes. Each story added to Aditya's burden of guilt. But something else happened too. As he met these families and heard their stories, he began to see a path forward. He couldn't undo the past, but he could try to repair the damage, at least partially. He created a plan. He would use the inheritance to compensate these families. Not just token amounts, but substantial reparations that would genuinely improve their lives. To the Sharma family, he offered to purchase back the land that his grandfather had stolen at its current market value, so they could reclaim their ancestral property. To the Desai family, he offered to fund their son's education, all the way through university and beyond if necessary. To the Patel family, he offered to help them purchase a new home and provide a financial cushion so they could rebuild their lives. One by one, he made similar offers to all 15 families on the list. The reactions were mixed. Some were skeptical, suspicious that this was some new scheme. Others were overwhelmed with gratitude. A few refused outright, saying no amount of money could make up for what had been done. But most eventually accepted, because while money couldn't erase the past, it could ease the present and open up possibilities for the future. The process was expensive, very expensive. Aditya calculated that properly compensating all 15 families would cost approximately 80% of the inheritance. When he told Neha what he planned to do, she was furious. You're going to give away almost everything? For people you don't even know? People who have no legal claim on you. They have a moral claim, Aditya said. My grandfather stole from them. I'm just returning what's theirs. It's not yours to return. Neha shouted. You inherited that wealth legally. Legal doesn't mean right. Aditya replied calmly. I can't enjoy a fortune built on the suffering of innocent people. I just can't. Neha looked at him with disappointment and anger. Then I can't be with someone who would throw away our future like this. I thought I was marrying a man with ambition, with sense, not a fool consumed by pointless guilt. She left that day. The engagement was broken. Aditya felt the loss deeply, but he also felt something else, relief. The weight on his conscience was beginning to lift. The process took nearly a year. During that time, Aditya lived modestly, spending as little as possible from what remained of the inheritance. He moved out of the mansion and into a simple apartment. The mansion itself became part of the reparation. He converted it into a community center and vocational training facility, open to underprivileged youth from the neighborhood, especially children from the families his grandfather had wronged. Kumar, the elderly estate manager, was confused by these decisions. Your grandfather would turn in his grave if he saw what you're doing with his legacy. Good, Aditya replied. Let him turn. He should be ashamed of what he did. But sir, Kumar said hesitantly, may I speak freely? Of course. I served your grandfather for 40 years. I saw him in his final days. He was not a happy man. The wealth brought him no joy. He died alone, bitter, haunted by his own choices. Perhaps he left everything to you hoping you would do better than he did. Aditya considered this. Did he ever express regret? Kumar nodded slowly. In his final months, he would sit in that study drinking, looking at those same letters you found. Once I heard him say, what was it all for? What did I gain? I think he knew, sir. I think he knew he had built his empire on sand and suffering. This revelation changed something in Aditya's perspective. His grandfather had been a villain, yes, but also a human being who, in the end, understood the emptiness of wealth gained through cruelty. Maybe the inheritance was indeed a kind of test, or an opportunity for redemption, not for Rajesh, who was beyond redemption, but for the family name itself. As Aditya completed the final reparation payment, helping the last family on the list purchase a small business, he felt a sense of completion. The curse was broken. The weight was lifted. He had spent almost everything. What remained was enough for a modest life, but nothing more. He would need to work, to build his own future through his own efforts. And strangely, that felt right. That felt clean. One evening, he visited his mother and told her everything he had done. She cried, not from sadness, but from pride. Your father would be so proud of you, she said. He refused the inheritance because he didn't want to benefit from it. But he also couldn't figure out how to fix what his father had broken. You found a way. I just did what seemed right, Aditya said. That's all integrity ever is, his mother replied. Doing what seems right, even when it costs you. 2 years after receiving the inheritance, Aditya was living a completely different life than he had imagined. He worked as an architect for a small but ethical firm. He lived in a modest apartment. He had no expensive car, no luxury items. By material standards, he was ordinary again. But he slept peacefully. The nightmares had stopped. The guilt that had consumed him was gone. One day, he received an unexpected letter. It was from Mr. Sharma, the first family he had approached. Dear Aditya, I wanted you to know that my grandson has graduated from the agricultural college, thanks to the education fund you established. He's going to manage the land you returned to us, using modern sustainable farming methods he learned. Our ancestral land will produce again, but this time without the bitterness that has haunted our family for decades. You gave us more than money or property. You gave us justice and dignity. You acknowledged the wrong that was done to us. That means more than you can know. Your grandfather took our land, but you gave us back our hope. May you be blessed for your courage and integrity. With gratitude, the Sharma family. Similar letters came from other families. The Desai's son, now studying engineering, wrote to thank him. The Patel family sent photos of their new home, with 3 generations smiling in front of it. Aditya kept these letters in a folder. They were worth more to him than any amount of money. He had also met someone new, a woman named Priya who worked at a non-profit organization. She knew his whole story and admired what he had done. Most people would have just kept the money and ignored the guilt, she said. The fact that you didn't says everything about your character. I couldn't live with it, Aditya said simply. Some prices are too high to pay, even for wealth. They began dating, slowly building a relationship based on shared values rather than money or status. One day, Priya asked him, "Do you regret it? Giving away the fortune?" Aditya thought carefully before answering. "I regret that my grandfather did what he did. I regret that so many people suffered. But giving away the money? No, that I don't regret at all." "Why not?" "Because I learned something important," Aditya said. "Wealth without integrity is worthless. In fact, it's worse than worthless. It's poison. It destroys you from the inside. My grandfather had everything and died alone and miserable. I have little, but I have peace. I can look at myself in the mirror. I can sleep at night. That's worth more than any inheritance." He paused, then added, "Besides, I did inherit something valuable from this whole experience." "What's that?" "I inherited the knowledge of who I want to be. Not someone who benefits from others' suffering. Not someone who prioritizes wealth over humanity. I want to be someone who, when faced with injustice, even injustice in the past, tries to make it right. That's the inheritance I choose to keep." Years later, Aditya would sometimes visit the community center that had once been his grandfather's mansion. He would watch young people learning trades, pursuing education, building their futures. Many of them came from the families his grandfather had wronged. Now, instead of suffering from Rajesh Malhotra's legacy, they were benefiting from it, but in a way that healed rather than harmed. One of the teachers at the center, a woman whose family had been on the list, approached him one day. "Mr. Malhotra," she said, "I wanted to thank you again. Because of what you did for my family, my brother was able to get medical treatment. He's healthy now. He's getting married next month. None of that would have been possible without your help." "I'm glad I could help," Aditya said. "But please, don't call me Mr. Malhotra. That name carries too much weight, too much history. Just call me Aditya." She smiled. "Aditya then, I hope you know that you've redeemed that name. When people in our community hear Malhotra now, they don't think of your grandfather's cruelty anymore. They think of your kindness. You've changed what that name means." After she left, Aditya stood in the courtyard of the center, thinking about inheritance and legacy. His grandfather had tried to build an inheritance of wealth and power, but that inheritance was cursed because it was built on suffering. Aditya had transformed it into something different, an inheritance of justice, healing, and hope. That was a legacy worth leaving behind. He thought about future generations, perhaps his own children someday. What would he leave them? Not money stolen from others, not a mansion built on suffering, but he would leave them the story of how, when faced with the sins of the past, he had chosen to make things right rather than benefit from wrongs. He would leave them the example of integrity over wealth, conscience over comfort. Remember, dear viewer, that we all inherit things from those who came before us. Sometimes we inherit wealth, sometimes poverty. Sometimes we inherit privileges, sometimes disadvantages. But we also inherit moral debts, the wrongs that were done in the past, often to create the advantages we enjoy today. The question is, what do we do with that knowledge? We can ignore it, telling ourselves that the past is not our responsibility. We can enjoy the benefits while turning a blind eye to how they were obtained. Or we can do what Aditya did, face the truth, acknowledge the harm, and work to make amends. Not because we're legally obligated, not because anyone is forcing us, but because living with integrity matters more than living in comfort built on others' suffering. Some inheritances come with a price. The question is whether you're willing to pay it. Thank you for watching. If this story made you think about the origins of your own advantages and what responsibilities might come with them, share it with someone who needs to hear this message.